My name is Timothy A. Hogswallop, renowned Civil War historian and astute Virginia gentleman. I'm just enjoying some of that fine Virginia sweet tea and admiring Robert E. Lee's trusty steed Traveler. You were too good for this world, Traveler. Today I'd like to talk to you all about how the South could have won the Battle of Gettysburg. Take that bridge, man, take that bridge. Oh, hello there. Hello everyone, I'm Aaron Smith for Forward Gettysburg, and I'm here to tell you why the South likely had no chance of winning the Battle of Gettysburg. Well, sir, I do declare I have never been so offended in my life. We certainly could have won the Battle of Gettysburg. Well, I have to imagine they would have won the great battle if they had Jeb Stuart and the cavalry. Well, if Robert E. Lee had Jeb Stuart and the cavalry, it's very likely the climactic battle of the campaign would not have happened at Gettysburg. They would have been able to scout the positions of the Union Army and be able to determine where they were at. So, it's very, very unlikely that all the armies would have converged at Gettysburg for such a climactic battle during this campaign. Stuart, however, was really deep in his feelings about being surprised at Brandy Station, and so in order to recover his good name, he decides he's going to go for another triumphant ride around the Union Army, and he ends up getting lost and leaving Robert E. Lee blind to the enemy's position. They certainly would have won if that dastard Ewell would have followed orders and taken Cemetery Hill. Well, you said if Ewell's corps had taken Cemetery Hill, they would have won the battle. And while that may be true, that wouldn't have happened for two different reasons. Reason number one, by the time that Ewell received the order to take Cemetery Hill was already being reinforced by Day 1's survivors. They also had a huge amount of cannon ready and in position on that hill. Not to mention they started constructing some crude breastworks and took advantage of the stone walls already there to mark off different property lines. The second reason why that wouldn't have worked was because Robert E. Lee gave that order very, very vaguely to Richard Ewell. He said, take that hill if practicable. Now Lee was used to giving orders to Stonewall Jackson, who needed very little direction and would oftentimes leave the details up to himself and come out with a plan and give a lot of order and direction to his division commanders. Ewell, at Gettysburg, was commanding a corps for the very first time. He was used to having his orders laid out step by step by step for him, rather than such a vague order as take that hill if practicable. So really, we can blame Robert E. Lee for not taking Cemetery Hill, not Richard. If the rebels would have gotten to Little Round Top only 5 minutes sooner, they could have taken that hill and won the entire battle. You brought up the Confederates capturing Little Round Top, and that's a common misconception, especially due to popular media hyping up Little Round Top's role in the battle. Little Round Top really wasn't that great of a position. The only reason the Union line needed to hold it is because it was the anchor of their far left flank. Little Round Top itself is a rather spiny hill covered in rocks. Not a great position for artillery. So, even if the Confederates held it, they would maybe be able to put a battery on that hill. Also, at the time, Union reinforcements were coming by the thousands to that part of the field. So, while the Union may have struggled to take the hill, nonetheless, they would have eventually carried the position. Our great Robert E. Lee only lost the battle because that bastard Longstreet was working against him. Well, you see, a lot of people, especially lost causers after the war, believed that James Longstreet was responsible for Lee's loss. He thought that Longstreet was working against him. That's totally untrue. Longstreet dutifully followed orders because he was a lifelong career soldier. Even when Longstreet's division commanders begged and pleaded with him, especially General Hood, to go around the Round Tops and attack the Union position from the rear, Longstreet still stuck to Lee's orders because those were the orders that his commanding general had given him. During the entire campaign, especially once they hit the Pennsylvania border, Longstreet wanted an offensive strategy but with defensive tactics. Basically, he wanted to fight the Union Army on a ground of their choosing while remaining on the offensive through the invasion of Pennsylvania. However, when Lee went against that plan that they both have somewhat agreed upon, oh hello Garfield, Garfield loves Longstreet stories. When they had gone against the plan that they both had agreed upon, Longstreet still dutifully followed Robert E. Lee's orders. If our beloved Stonewall Jackson was there, oh boy, he would have given them Yankees some hell. You know, I'll give you partial credit for that one. If Stonewall Jackson was there, maybe they had a chance to win the battle. Stonewall Jackson was a general's general, a genius on the battlefield. However, I highly doubt we'd be discussing a Gettysburg campaign. Personally, I feel Stonewall Jackson would have acted much more aggressively in his invasion of Pennsylvania. So rather than a Gettysburg campaign, perhaps we would currently be discussing a Pittsburgh campaign, or a Philadelphia campaign, or certainly a Harrisburg campaign. You know, I bet if Walker's brigade wasn't fooling around and had joined Johnson in his attack on Culp's Hill, they could have carried that position and captured the Baltimore Pike. You know, I personally feel that July 2nd at Culp's Hill was the closest the Confederates came to putting the Union in a position where the Confederates would have won the battle. At one point, they were a mere 500 yards away from the Baltimore Road, which was, of course, as we know, Meade's supply line, communication line, and also his route of retreat. However, if Walker's brigade had been there, they probably could have carried the Baltimore Pike. That being said, without the cavalry, Walker's brigade had to protect the flanks and make sure that the Union cavalry and perhaps soldiers or infantry weren't up to any shenanigans. Sadly, due to the circumstances, due to their lack of cavalry, Walker's brigade had to protect the flank of the Confederate Army. I bet if our brave gunners in the artillery there on July 3rd had had a better aim, they could have softened up that Yankee infantry, and our boys would have driven them all the way back to Washington, D.C. You know, you may be onto something here, especially talking about the cannons. 150 plus cannons is nothing to shake a stick at. Like I said in a previous video, it was the largest bombardment ever in North America. They could hear it as far as Harrisburg and York, and there were even reports of people hearing it all the way in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. itself. However, the powder of the days, black powder, was an incredibly smoky powder. So as soon as that cannonade began, the Confederate artillerists had a very poor view of their targets. It was even reported by Professor Jacobs, a mathematician at Pennsylvania College at the time, that the air that day was very still. So without any wind moving that smoke out of the way so the Confederates could clearly see their target, they really had a very uphill battle, so to say, hitting accurate artillery fire upon Cemetery Ridge. You know, it's an incredibly fun exercise that historians and Gettysburg buffs alike like to play. how the South could have won the Battle of Gettysburg. Time and time again, we hear the arguments about Little Round Top and Jeb Stuart's cavalry, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, the reality of the situation and the reality of what happened during the battle is that the South had very, very little chance to win the battle. Sure, there were some moments where they could have come close if they would have had another brigade in support at one point on their attack, or if they had just pushed a little bit further at Culp's Hill, perhaps, maybe, just maybe, they could have eked out a victory. However, there's no denying that Meade had the advantage of interior lines. He could reinforce his fishhook-shaped Union line from other parts of his line. That is an incredible advantage. If the Confederates wanted to do that, they would have had to march at the longest 5 miles from one end of their line to the other. The Union, on the other hand, any point on their line was within 2 miles of any other point. That's an incredible advantage. Not to mention the advantage of manpower. Of course, the Confederates eked out victories at Chancellorsville, Fredericksburg, 2nd Manassas, being outnumbered by the Union Army. However, a defensive position such as Gettysburg, along Cemetery Ridge, the Round Tops, Cemetery Hill, and Culp's Hill, was nearly impregnable to attackers on the rebel side. Nonetheless, it is still really fun to imagine how the South could have won the Battle of Gettysburg. Well, despite what you say, sir, Gettysburg in Adams County should have been rightful Virginia clay. As always, this is Aaron Smith, your host for Forward Gettysburg. Thank you for joining me. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you on the next one.